This is a nothing. Yes, did they play perfect? No, they still win. Yes.
What are you doing if the Celtics win the championship?
If the Celtics win championship, I might break my sobriety. I might act up.
We did it! You got him.
All the way.
Celtics versus Heat. Celtics in what?
4.
Celtics versus Knicks. Celtics in
4.
Got Celtics in 4? Hell yeah.
Use a vocab word from a couple years ago. It's mind-boggling.
That's it, DRG. Let's go. What do you think for tonight?
You think I'm worried about the Warriors? I ain't worried about the
Let's go, baby. 18, baby. Load up the boat.
Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not. No,
recently he's putting up games like
above our head for the players.
literally right now.
But I think when Marcus, especially Marcus, when he got traded, I think that was a wake-up call.
You think right now,
Rob,
it's still New York?
I do. And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
Whew. A win is a win. A game winner is a game winner, Seamus. That is all I have to say, I think.
Yeah, that's what the theme has been in January. A win is a win because can we do it comfortably anymore? Just after I know we do it comfortably every other game, but can we do it for 2 games in a row? Can we do it comfortably? I mean, last game was 22. Tonight was 20 less. Just 2.
We were about 0.2 seconds away from having a whole different vibe. Excuse me. On this post-game show. But what is going on, everybody? Welcome back in to the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I am your host, Rave Tanjoy. With me is my co-host. You guys know him, Seamus Zarlingo. Guys, tonight, the Boston Celtics, they were able to escape with a very narrow win thanks to our 2 All-Stars, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, the 2 of them coming up very clutch down the stretch. JB with a bucket to give Boston a 2-point lead with 32 seconds remaining left in this game. And obviously, Jason Tatum with the go-ahead game winner to beat New Orleans. 118-116 was your final score. Seamus, obviously a win is a win, and you prefer to win these types of games and lose these types of games. However, I am interested to know your thoughts and takeaways from tonight.
Well, tonight's game, it was, well, as predicted from the Boston Celtics, specifically in the month of January, to round out the month of January tonight on January 31st. It's every other game with this team. It's one game you play dominant basketball. The next game you're playing really just not up to par against an inferior opponent. And really, I thought this was not a terrible, terrible game from the Boston Celtics all around. It wasn't a Toronto affair by any metric. It wasn't a Sacramento game by any means whatsoever. It wasn't even the first New Orleans game. If you think back to that 3-game stretch, this game I didn't think had that same vibe to it, because really you look at the individual performances tonight, many Celtics played well. Kristaps, you see on the top of the screen, he had a great night. Brown and Tatum both, you really said it at the top of the broadcast, they saved the Celtics down the stretch. And ultimately Derek White, we'll get into him later as well. And Sam Hauser off the bench, finally coming off of injury, actually contributed to the Boston Celtics as well. So there were a lot of nice individual performances on the Boston Celtics tonight, but it didn't necessarily culminate in the Celtics dominating this game consistently, and there wasn't too much domination within it at all. Now, it did feel like the Pelicans were playing from behind for most of the night, but the Celtics, they just couldn't get a stop and couldn't quite hit home all of the offensive details in which they needed to put consistent points up on the board. And that's really been the theme of the Celtics team for the past 2 months is, they go on a good defensive stretch and then they can't get the offense right. They go on a good offensive stretch. They can't get the defense right. And that's what it kind of felt like tonight between the Pelicans and Celtics, because the Celtics, they controlled parts of this game, but the Pelicans were always creeping around, always there to make a stop. The Celtics, they couldn't quite put consistent points up on the board and couldn't quite make consistent stops. And down the stretch, you'd like to see the Celtics again play better, because ultimately The Celtics, if they really handle the details again down the stretch, as we've seen they've actually not done in the month of January whatsoever, they come out of here with a comfortable win. There were a couple of games watching the post games last year at this time of the year. You'd be surprised how many games were actually pretty close. A 5-point game, 3-point game here and there. But the Celtics, it always felt like a comfortable win because they were going ahead and closing out games down the stretch. 4, 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left. The Celtics would really pull ahead, put enough cushion in front of themselves in order to go and win the game. Yet this year, it just feels like the Celtics, they'll put a little bit of that cushion, but then it's eroded right away. And then all of a sudden, we're looking at a game-winning scenario down the stretch. Super clutch shot by Jason Tatum. I would love to see the Celtics going forward, and even Jason Tatum, get a better shot in that situation. Finally, the variance is working in his favor from all the past shots. You see Jason Tatum clank for the win, but this season, 2-game winners for Jason Tatum already. And really, they weren't great shots, but you're glad they went in because ultimately that splits, again, 2 losses and 2 wins from the Boston Celtics. And no matter whether the shot was good or not, you just want to take the wins where you can get them. The Celtics, they win back-to-back games yet again tonight. Now they're starting, I would say, starting to, yeah, last week they won back-to-back games for the first time in nearly a month, and now we did it again. So just saying, maybe a little bit of a change here with the team ultimately, although I would still say they're a little bit too into still their inconsistent stretch. We expected a much bigger win tonight, and it just didn't really play out that way.
No, it didn't. Again, anytime you can win a game like this, you're happy about it, right? Much better to win this type of game than lose this type of game, obviously. It was a weird, so like you're sitting there and you're watching the game, and we talked about this before it came on. And you're thinking to yourself, like, God, like New Orleans just isn't missing. I mean, Trey Murphy, shout out to him, huge game, 40 points on 75% from the floor. Like, that is ridiculous. And the shots he was making were really just, I mean, it was phenomenal to watch him do that. It hurt against our team, but I mean, it was very impressive. So on the one hand, you're like, okay, well, these guys came to play tonight. And then the other hand, you're looking, you're like, okay, well, Boston, they're turning the ball over. They're giving up some open looks. So I tend to agree with you. I think this was a game that you could, look at and be like, okay, New Orleans, they came to play. Trey Murphy had 40 on 75 from the floor. But to me, I think this was easily preventable from Boston to keep it as at least a larger margin of victory. However, I do like their intents tonight. I thought their energy was there. I'm starting to see that more, but a good win, but not necessarily a win I was expecting to see out of Boston. In that regard, however, again, anytime an opposing player puts up 40 on 75% shooting from the floor and 67% from 3, it's going to be a tough one to win. So credit to Trey Murphy tonight for balling out. From a Celtics standpoint, though, I agree. I really thought individually they were playing very well. They just couldn't tie it to a cohesive game. It felt like it kind of was just all over the place tonight. And that's kind of been a trend that you're seeing with this team. But overall, I didn't hate this game. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Again, anytime you can win a game like this is a good sign. Now, Seamus, I do want to look at the lead tracker here because this is at least a positive that I look at it from this game. Boston did control this game for pretty much the entire stretch outside of that late first quarter, early second quarter margin. Obviously, New Orleans kind of took the lead midway, a little bit deeper midway into that third quarter for a brief stance there. Obviously, Boston's biggest lead tonight was 9 to New Orleans 6. We had 8 lead changes on the game. So kind of a back and forth game that Boston was able to kind of control. So for you, I know we talked about it a little bit, but was this a game that you're looking at and thinking, okay, this was New Orleans coming to play? Or was this more, okay, Boston, they let New Orleans into this game?
Well, that question I think can only be answered by looking at different portions of the game. Because I think there were times tonight where you looked at what the Celtics did and went, they could definitely be better in this spot. But then there were other times, specifically down the stretch, where you look at New Orleans and they were just hitting impossible shots. I wouldn't say the Celtics defense was as atrocious as it's been this month of January in this game. And a lot of it had to do with tough shot making by the Pelicans down the stretch. But you do look at really the lead tracker and throughout the second quarter, specifically going into halftime. Now the Celtics, they had a good second quarter, but then going into the third quarter, that little stretch right before halftime and then going into the third quarter, it wasn't the best for the Boston Celtics. I thought defensively they let a lot go under their nose, and offensively there were a lot of turnarounds within that stretch right there where you looked at it and went, "Oh, Boston, could they get the lead up to 10? Could they really extend their run right here?" And it just didn't happen, and then the game would swing the other way. And really, I thought tonight there were some moments from Boston like that, but I didn't see it throughout the entire game, which is the point of optimism I will say is going on with the Boston Celtics right now. And even to highlight a couple of players, I think Derek White, he's been playing way, way better as of late. I think that's changing the entire complexity of the team. You think about it, Derek White doesn't show up tonight, Celtics might lose this game. And I know there were other key players within tonight's game, Jaylen Brown as well. I mean, he shot super efficiently from the floor in this particular matchup, and he's not been the whole season's really been for the team and Jaylen Brown very inconsistent this season from both the team and himself individually, but he shoots efficiently tonight. And as I mentioned to start this post game, there are a lot of good individual performances within this particular game that point to the fact that if some of these guys didn't quite have the games that they had, and really games that we haven't been seeing consistently out of them lately, like Jaylen Brown, like Derek White, Celtics, they might actually walk out of New Orleans with a loss. And that's a trend we've been seeing as of late, is just dropping terrible games to terrible teams. I mean, New Orleans, they walked into this matchup with an awful record above 500 for against teams above 500, of course. And the Celtics, they almost let that one slip away from them last time at the Garden. Tonight, you could say quite the same, but I would still say, looking at that lead tracker and even really watching the game, it did feel like the Celtics had control of it. It just didn't feel like they could put the pedal to the floor all the way in order to really go and run out in front of New Orleans. So I do think a lot of it had to do with how hard New Orleans is playing, but there was some in there with in terms of how the Celtics played as well. There were specifically that late second quarter, early third quarter. I think the Celtics, they could have really extended their run right there and kind of let the rope go a little bit. And then down the stretch, it was kind of back and forth, but then Celtics, they still had the lead. They still had the lead for most of the time down the stretch. And really, they just let some big shots go in. And I really thought New Orleans, that was just some tough shot making by the Pelicans down the stretch. So it's a little bit of both depending on what part of the game you look at. So there's some points of optimism from the Celtics right here, but you also look there's still some negative, inconsistent things going around this Celtics team right now that they certainly need to square away before, I mean, really later in the season going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think it poses a question. I mean, recently we've seen, I don't want to say low caliber, right? Because, you know, Trey Murphy is a very solid NBA player alongside Dillon Brooks and some of these other guys, but it has been a trend to see kind of these middle of the pack role players. I want to, you know, maybe that's a little disrespectful, but it is what it is, kind of go off against Boston. And, you know, you see a lot of people in this kind of social sphere of this organization and this fan base, you know, kind of proclaim it as, oh, you know, teams are waking up now to play the Celtics. And for me, it's like, is that the case? Or is there something fundamentally defensively that Boston's doing wrong to allow this to happen?
See, like a month ago, we were talking about that here on this program. We were bringing it up going, you know, the Celtics, every team is giving them their best shot this season. But I think as the month of January went along, that just became a completely overused excuse by everybody in the fan base and analysts out there as well, where they were saying, oh, well, tonight everybody's just showing up against the Celtics and playing their best brand of basketball. There's some truth to that, no doubt. However, that game against the Houston Rockets when Dillon Brooks hits 10 3-pointers, half of them were wide open.
Right.
And that's not, oh, Dillon Brooks just randomly came to play. Dillon Brooks comes to play every single night. I mean, he was in Memphis last night doing the exact same thing which he did in Boston, blowing kisses to the crowd. And so a player like that, I look at and go, well, he's bringing it every single night. He has a career night against the Boston Celtics. It's not just the fact that he's randomly reaching a new level against the Celtics because the Celtics are defending champions, but it's rather the Celtics, they are reaching a new level in terms of a new low, and specifically their defensive effort on some occasions, and really their defensive miscommunication and really communication, I should say, but really that goes back to miscommunication on the defensive end of the floor. It's been a lot of that this season, and sometimes you will see the Celtics, it's not as if they're not giving effort defensively. It's just as if they're not using their brains entirely. They're not quite rotating the way they should be. They're over helping. It's really confusing as to what's going on the defensive end of the floor this season, and it's been transpiring the entirety of the year. But you do see the games in between. You go, oh, the Golden State game, the Magic game. Even tonight's game, I thought there were good defensive moments. And then, of course, the other night against Chicago, the Celtics came to play defensively, yet that will not happen every single game. And that's what's honestly affecting some of these career nights for some of these. I would agree. They're middle of the pack players. They're not all-star level players, and middle of the pack isn't too disrespectful, because if you looked at Basketball Reference or any stat page you wanted to and brought up any number, they're kind
I'd
of
love to be
floating
a
right
middle of
there
the
in the
pack
middle.
player. You know, I'd do
They're
anything
not
to be a middle of
necessarily
the pack player.
there has to be middle of the pack role players in the NBA.
Right.
And these
I'd
these
do
guys
it. I
still
mean, come
make
on,
20
sign me
million
up.
a year.
Yeah,
And it's
sign
like,
me up.
yeah.
I'd do it in a heartbeat.
And ultimately, these guys, they're still, again, some of them are still very good players in which could do this on any given night. Trey Murphy, I mean, he's just a flamethrower. He's almost, I'm going to make this comparison, but I'm not saying they're the same player or anything, but he's almost a Peyton Pritchard-esque confidence three-point shooter from deep, because he's that three-point shooter. He'll just pull up from anywhere at any time, and he'll pull up from deep. Him and Peyton Pritchard have two of the longest, or the longest average shot distance in the league. And so some of these players, they have the confidence to go out there and do that to the Boston Celtics, like Trey Murphy did tonight, like Dylan Brooks did the other night against the Boston Celtics at the Garden. And when the Celtics, if they're not up to their standard on defense, which right now the standard is just being thrown around everywhere. I think the standard, what we expected, was what happened last season, just a complete lockdown team. This season, it's been all over the place. You'll see one night the team locks down, another night the team doesn't lock down, and you never quite know what you're going to get from the Boston Celtics. But that's a huge equation in a lot of these guys going off. It's really the Celtics defense. Yes, you want to give them credit because, like I said, these players can do that on any given night. But at the same time, a lot has to do with the Boston Celtics, and it's not just teams waking up for the Boston Celtics. If you want to get paid in the NBA, ultimately you have to wake up every single night. Defending champion, if you're facing the defending champions, certainly it's a different game, but it doesn't reach a level of, oh, well, it just looks like everybody is having a career night on the Boston Celtics. That's not a thing. It's Celtics defense.
And you know, it's also, there's an aspect to it where it's like, okay, coming into the year, you acknowledge this, right? You had a bombshell of a quote come out from head coach Joe that was like, oh, we hope the red dot's right between our forehead, right? So it's like, okay, well, that red dot, it's there, even if that is the case. And it sometimes feels like that this Celtics team, you know, is very okay with Dylan Brooks beating them, right? And it's like, well, no, because, you know, it gets to a point where these are all very capable NBA talents, right? Especially where the league's at right now. There's about 8 guys on almost any team that can really get you 20. Like, you know, we say, like, you know, the Celtics team, you know, no, like around the NBA, there's a lot of guys that can just randomly get you 20 right now where the league's at. I mean, it's very talented. So I tend to agree with you. I don't think it's just players randomly waking up to play the Boston Celtics, right? I think at times Boston defensively has these mislapses that allows players to get in rhythm. And then when they are in rhythm, they don't make adjustments quick enough to get them out of the rhythm. And I do think tonight, I think we saw an adjustment be made defensively in that fourth quarter against Murphy to try to run him off the 3-point line and get him into the paint. However, he was still finishing at the rim very, very well. But I agree with you. I don't think there is I don't think it's just randomly these guys like, oh, Boston Celtics. Yeah, no, I'm going to give them 40 tonight. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case.
I'm going to go a little off topic here. Do you ever think Trey Murphy, do you think because he's in New Orleans, I look at Trey Murphy and go, why do they need Brandon Ingram? Why do they need Zion Williamson? These guys are never in the lineup. they're not reliable. We've seen them in the past. There's just not really be championship level players as the number one. I'm not saying Trey Murphy can be the number one, but I do look at a player like him and go, why exactly does New Orleans have these other forwards on their roster at this given moment? I understand it could be the timeline. It could be happening. Maybe trade deadline's coming up. Just
Well,
saying.
yeah,
Just
there's a lot of
less,
rumors right now about Ingram
less
getting
than a
moved.
week away, and the off season, of course, a couple months away. But I do look at New Orleans, and I don't know about your opinion on New Orleans, but I feel like they not build around Trey Murphy, but get rid of these other guys. Start really honing in on the fact you have an all-star level forward in Trey Murphy that could, I think, if they give him the ball more and more and more. We've seen him twice this season against the Boston Celtics. That's what also we want to point out here too about Trey Murphy. He didn't just have this type of career night against the Boston Celtics tonight. He also scorched the Celtics the other time the Celtics played the Pelicans earlier this month, and it was much of the same. And that consistent multi-level scoring presence from Trey Murphy, the fact he can hit that deep three, pulls up with confidence, and the fact he can go to the rim, and on the defensive end of the floor, he has a lot of length, a lot of athleticism, can shut different guys down, can defend multiple positions. Look at a guy like Trey Murphy and go, it's kind of being relegated behind guys like Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. I do feel like, see, this is another one of those situations where I go, we're being beat by somebody who is considered in the middle of the pack. I would say, sure, Trey Murphy is undoubtedly in the middle of the pack from where everybody stands right now. But I also look at it and go, some of the guys we are beat by on any given night, they can be an all-star level player. Plus, I think in the future, some of the players we're really getting torched by as of late could be all-stars. I think the other night, Amin Thompson, I think he has a bright future in front of him. Tonight, Trey Murphy, still a very young player. I think potentially he could be the New Orleans Pelicans forward of the future. Now, New Orleans is typically a franchise that fumbles these type of bags, but you see it right in front of us. The last two games against the Pelicans, Trey Murphy was amazing. And I just kind of asked the question of why is New Orleans fumbling around with their forward rotation with Ingram and Zion Williamson, who aren't seemingly team leaders whatsoever. They're not reliable in terms of their injury, their injury history, their health, and really just being on the floor playing team basketball. But a guy like Trey Murphy, he is. I'm
Right.
just saying.
No, I agree with you. And I think you're going to see that with New Orleans moving forward. I think it was a failed experiment with this kind of core they put together. That was Zion and Ingram, and really dating back to when they acquired Lonzo from that trade to move off of Anthony Davis. I think it was mismanagement by management. I think a couple of things didn't go their way. Obviously, the Zion injuries, and then Ingram went down. And then I agree with you. I think a lot of it was on like the immaturity of their stars, right? Of their supposed to be young stars, Ingram and Zion. I think you saw the organization try to combat that by bringing in veterans like McCollum, and they had Steven Adams there for a stretch. And I think they tried, but right now, if you're New Orleans, it's time to move on. And I think they're going to try to do that this deadline. Tune in to the trade deadline special. That is going to be, we will be live all day. A little self promo right there. So I do think, I tend to agree with you in terms of, like, even you mentioned Trey Murphy. I'm going to mention Herb Jones, right? You have an all NBA defensive first team caliber guy. That's also a 6'8", really athletic, long wing defender that, again, you ask me, what's the key to success in the NBA? I just described it. It's Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. They have the frames. So, I think if you're New Orleans, you got to do that this offseason, or not even this offseason. See if you can do it at the deadline. Because right now, this draft class, you're looking at Ace Bailey, you're looking at Dylan Harper, you're looking at Cooper Flagg, who are three generational talents. So if you're lucky enough to maybe get one of those three guys to pair alongside Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, maybe you're, fast tracking to a rebuild, but I don't know.
New Orleans, imagine the team they could have potentially gained in the offseason if they didn't make the DeJounte Murray deal. They had Dyson Daniels sitting on their roster. That became one of the worst deals of the entire offseason. Right away. In November, everybody was going, oh, yep, this was a mistake. The Pelicans, they give up Dyson Daniels and Larry Nance and picks for DeJounte Murray alone, who
Well,
I wouldn't even say is above Dyson Daniels at this point in time. And DeJounte Murray's had a couple good moments against the Celtics this season, still a quality player, but you'd rather have the 21-year-old rising star in
right.
Dyson Daniels than DeJounte Murray, who's a little bit older. You could have had Dyson Daniels if you're the Pelicans. Plus, you have, again, Herb Jones, like you mentioned, and Trey Murphy. Those could be your two forward spots, essentially. And instead, you don't. This is the problem with the Pelicans coming into specifically this season. The roster balance was all over the place. Guard wise, they had a caked up guard rotation. They didn't really, the guards didn't really match within their rotation. And then you look at the forward rotation, that was even more of a caked mess because you have Zion Williamson, you have Brandon Ingram, you have Herb Jones, Trey Murphy as well, and they had no centers. Now they've thankfully been getting nice production out of their rookie center, who we saw again tonight, Missy, and we saw him in Boston a couple of weeks ago have a good game as well, and he's really in the running for Rookie of the Year, believe it or not. And I'm not sure if he's actually going to win it, but he's actually in the running at this moment in time. Daniel Tice is there as well, and you have Carlo Matkovic, who played a little bit tonight, but he's really, no offense to him, but he's not necessarily anything special for the New Orleans Pelicans. And what you have within this roster is just this imbalanced mess all over the place. But if they really managed it correctly, you could have had Dyson Daniels, you could have had Herb Jones, you could have had Trey Murphy all starting in the same lineup. And then you have assets such as McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, even, well, I shouldn't say DeJounte Murray because they would have had Dyson Daniels and not DeJounte Murray, but even Alvarado, if you really wanted to flip him anywhere. The New Orleans Pelicans, they had an embarrassment of riches essentially within their lineup. And now we look at them tonight and it's, oh, well, their two best players essentially, or supposed two best players, aren't playing out there on the floor. And the roster is completely imbalanced. They are 12 and I believe 37 after tonight, which a lot of that has to do with injury, of course, and what they've had to deal with this season. But the New Orleans Pelicans, this is just the prime example of mismanagement in the league. And they're really in that group of teams, the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, the Kings. These three teams just have no idea how to get off the ground whatsoever. It feels like 2 steps forward, they take 3 steps back. It's all the time. And we see it's terrible to look at because tonight you see it from a guy like Trey Murphy, who I believe if he was on another team somewhere else, we would actually be potentially looking at a younger all-star. And I really do believe that with how talented Trey Murphy is. And instead, he's sitting in New Orleans where this forward rotation is all over the place. You don't know if Zion's playing. You don't know if Brandon Ingram's playing. Trey Murphy, is he coming off the bench? Is he starting? What's going on here? And there was a little bit of an extension debacle with him at the beginning of the season. And if he was just in a better situation somewhere else, this is really, we're going to highlight this right now, how important situations are in the NBA. I think the narrative around Trey Murphy would be a lot different in the NBA right now and the level he's at. And that's what also makes this performance. You just got to put a little bit of a grain of salt in it tonight. That Trey Murphy, I really do believe if he was somewhere like Houston or if he was in Boston, of course, that just is ridiculous, the Brown and Tatum, but say he was in this situation, people would be talking about him a lot differently. And it's not as if, some random player just kind of went off on the Celtics. I do believe Trey Murphy is ultra talented and that the Pelicans, they have some gems still on their roster, but do I believe they're actually going to turn them into diamonds and turn it into a championship trophy? I really don't see it, unfortunately. I think these are the only occasions where we do see it from the New Orleans Pelicans. We almost beat the Celtics twice this season, but not quite. Didn't quite do it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that Dyson Daniels trade. And Dyson Daniels back in like December came out and said, like, listen, when you're in New Orleans, you're kind of out there just left to die. And he essentially said that his career wasn't going anywhere in New Orleans. And it's funny you say that. Also on the DeJounte Murray front, unfortunately, an update on that injury he suffered, that non-contact an ankle area injury. It did get breaking and brought out that he will miss the remainder of the year with a ruptured Achilles. So
okay, I saw that earlier and went, well, actually, no, that was the Alvarado injury. So I'm not even commenting on DeJounte Murray, but that's terrible.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
So another big blow again. So you look at New Orleans right now, you get this news that DeJounte is going to be out for the year. You're already what you said, 12-37. You have really, you're eliminated kind of even from the play-in opportunity here. Does that change their perspective going into the deadline? I think it does. I think, you look at McCollum, you look at Ingram, you got to offload. You got a lot of pieces that contending teams, right? Teams like Miami, teams like Golden State, teams like, Milwaukee, that are really desperate to kind of get themselves up there in the upper echelon and compete for a championship. Right. I think you're going to see some of those teams try to swoop in and take some of these guys. So, that injury kind of changes the trajectory for this Pelicans, moving to the deadline, I think.
If I'm going down the list of the Pelicans roster, I think at the deadline now, DeJounte Murray's not going to be available necessarily because torn Achilles. No, I don't see a team really taking. He's at his lowest value point right now.
Right.
They're probably not going to be able to move him anywhere for anything of value. But McCollum, Ingram, Williamson, find those guys different destinations and find minutes for guys like Jordan Hawkins, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Missy. We saw again tonight. We've seen him consistently for this team this season. Alvarado, keep him because I think he is a culture builder there in New Orleans. I think he's almost like a Cole Anthony type where it's not as if he's the most efficient player out there on the floor, but Alvarado really does bring those good vibes into the locker room, and he does have that culture building presence for him. But everybody else, I mean, even looking at Tice, Jeremiah Robinson, Earl, and Javonte Green, I mean, Matkovich, all these guys, I would definitely consider moving on from literally half the team if you're the New Orleans Pelicans at the deadline, and your keepers are easily, I think, Alvarado, Hawkins, Murphy, Herb Jones, and Missy. Make that your starting five right there. Go ahead with it and just play it out. And I think you build from the floor and go there. And anybody else, you're just fooling around with guys like DeJounte Murray. I know, unfortunately, he just tore his Achilles, but really, DeJounte Murray, is he building you anything? McCollum, Ingram, Williamson. At this point in time, those are veterans in which you're fooling around with ultimately if you're the New Orleans Pelicans. But yeah, the Pelicans, I think it'd be a fire sale team easily by the trade deadline.
Easily, without a doubt.
And we just saw them twice this month, and very interesting because these are the type of matchups where you look at and go, we just faced this team twice, but by the end of the year, we won't see them again, yet they're going to look likely completely different if that is, of course, the case at the trade deadline, that they become a fire sale team.
Well, and again, you said it. It's a weird complexion with this roster because you go down the list, right? Like you just said, and it's like they have so much talent, right? You got McCollum, you got obviously Murray's hurt, but you got Ingram and you got Zion, and you have excuse me, Trey Murphy and and Herb Jones, and you just have Alvarado. You have a group of 8 guys that you throw on the roster, and you'd think, okay, this is going to be an upper echelon team. At least, right, playing around with that, high tier playing, low tier, 6 seed and above team in the West. And, injuries has really bitten this team in the ass this season, which is unfortunate. But, for me, I look at New Orleans. I think they're going to be, you talk about teams at this deadline that make the biggest splashes, right? Because really they're offloading. They're not making splashes, but that give up the most. I would not be shocked if, because again, we talk about mismanagement. If they can if they're smart, right, and they can manage this ship properly, they will offload everything they got and they will go into a full tank mode into the second portion of this season, coming out of the All-Star break. Because again, they got the framework, right? They got those pieces. You just got to, get those picks, right? Pull an OKC, get those buttload of picks, get those, young talent that you can just throw out there. And if it works, it's a big positive. If it doesn't work, oh, who cares? You're tanking anyway. So definitely an interesting team to look at here as the deadline moves forward. I don't think I've said it. Oh, but I'm going to say it again. Trade deadline special, guys. Make sure you come in. We're going to be talking about it all day on this deadline. Was that February 9th, if I'm not mistaken?
I think it's February 6th.
6th.
February
6th.
9th is Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. You're right. The 6th.
Also,
so
my mom's
again,
birthday. Shout out, Mom.
shout out Ma. But yes, we're gonna be talking about all day on the deadlines. My favorite, I think the favorite thing we do here on Celtics Talk Weekly is that deadline special. But let's talk about our player of the game tonight, because it felt like there's about 3 guys that deserved this. Yeah, I had to go with the man on top of our screen, guys, the SeatGeek player spotlight tonight, Kristaps Porzingis. Now, before I talk about KP, I just want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of the post-game show this season, guys, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the best ticketing app on the market. They have you covered for all live events in your area, guys. Now, at checkout, use code Celtics Weekly for $20 off your first purchase. That link was in the top of the description down below, guys. Again, huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring this portion of the post-game show. Seamus, Kristaps Porzingis tonight, he didn't have the most efficient shooting night, but man, oh man, was he dominant on both ends of the floor. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. You see that right there. That's not a typo. 7, and I should know. I'm the king of typos. 7 stocks on the game. KP, absolutely, obviously 5 of 12 from the floor, 2 of 7 from deep. You talk about, how big KP has been on both ends of the floor. It kind of feels like we talked about this again before we went live. A lot during the beginning of the year, that interior defense was not there. Tonight, it kind of felt like Boston was getting beat off that dribble. It just so happens they ran into that 7-footer unicorn of KP. How big was he on the defensive end of the floor tonight?
Kristaps Porzingis is really starting to come around on the defensive end of the floor, and it's really a gauge for how healthy he's getting this season, because early on in the season, I thought Kristaps Porzingis defensively was one of the worst links of the Celtics defensively. Now, 7'3" frame, he's going to be able to do things out there defensively anyway with how long he is and how big he is. But just his activity on the defensive end of the floor was one of the weakest links for the Boston Celtics. He was just playing way off guys, letting guys go right around him, and essentially really not contesting shots the way we know he can at the rim. But really the last half month, I would say Kristaps Porzingis has turned the corner on the defensive end of the floor, and you're seeing a lot of that presence down low. And yes, that was against the New Orleans Pelicans, by the way. Hey, there you go. Bam!
Pelicans,
look at that.
Not the Bulls. Oh
yeah,
my
you guys
God!
Didn't see that earlier. You guys didn't
Oh
see that.
my God! I've been. It's been a long day. It's been a long day for me.
Well, you did mention it. I mean, you said king of typo.
I know. And I was like, oh my! I don't. Let's continue.
We're giving people what they want, what they expect. You got to fulfill expectations. The Celtics, they fulfill weird expectations. We got to do it here too. But ultimately, the Kristaps Porzingis factor for the Boston Celtics defensively. And so it's so huge talking about him defensively, because really when Robert Williams was shipped off to Portland, we were all wondering, oh yeah, who's going to be that back line of defense for the Boston Celtics? And at the time, it was Porzingis and Robert Williams on the same roster. But then once Robert Williams was removed out of the conversation, it was really, can Kristaps Porzingis make up that defensive presence? Well, last season, he very much did with the Boston Celtics in his time out on the floor. And this season, it's been a little back and forth, but really I attribute that to the fact he was rehabbing the entire summer, had to come back into the lineup, and his feet weren't quite under him already when he came back. And really what we're seeing now is Kristaps start to really ramp up into the player in which we knew and loved last season, and even into the past when he even wasn't with the Celtics, with the Wizards beforehand, and even the Dallas Mavericks. And think back to the Knicks as well before he tore his ACL. Kristaps Porzingis, he's starting to really show that activity on the defensive end of the floor. I think his activity is much better at this point in time. Just him moving his feet around the floor, being in the right positions, and really down low, just being that presence who's down there blocking shots. The Celtics, they had 7 blocks tonight as a team. 4 of them came from Kristaps Porzingis. And Kristaps, even against the Rockets, I thought there was that Amin Thompson shot down the stretch, not the one that won the game, but the one before the Alperen Şengün dunk. So you got three possessions in a row where the Celtics could have came up with a stop, maybe forced overtime, or even won the game. Unfortunately, the Celtics weren't able to stop any of them. But the one they almost stopped and really should have was that possession against Amin Thompson, where he just put up over Porzingis, and then Porzingis played phenomenal defense on that possession. Even Jaylen Brown, he played phenomenal defense on that possession too. Both of them were contesting Amin Thompson's shot, and unfortunately, better offense beat good defense. And Kristaps Porzingis, I looked at that play and went, he almost won the game for the Boston Celtics right there. He was straight up and down, doing everything technique wise and positioning was phenomenal for Kristaps Porzingis on that play, and Amin Thompson just hit an impossible shot, and that really, it's again another highlight for Kristaps Porzingis. Even though Amin Thompson made that shot, that Kristaps Porzingis, he was able to show up on that end down the stretch. Now, unfortunately, the next play there was miscommunication with him and Jaylen Brown, and that went awry. But even that, I look at it and go, well, that's not Kristaps Porzingis's defensive effort or his defensive ability. That's the team miscommunicating, and that's really what's been this team's biggest flaw all season is the miscommunication on the defensive end of the floor. And really tangenting onto another subject for one little second here, the Celtics, that's what still gives us optimism and hope that this Celtic team can go back to back. It's really the little things with this Celtic team. The ability is still there. Everybody is still good defensively. It's not as if, oh, Drew Holiday, well, he just can't defend anymore. Or Derek White, he can't defend. These guys can defend. It's just the fact of where are they positioned on the floor? How are they communicating with their teammates? And it's really just all of those little things. Am I going under or over a screen? Are we switching on this? Are we not? And it's just all the little aspects of the game of basketball, specifically on the defensive end of the floor, that have been biting the Celtics in the ass this season. And we saw it on that play with Kristaps Porzingis and Jaylen Brown. But going back to Kristaps, he is that player that you ultimately look at and say he still has his ability as both an offensive player. We saw the other night hitting 8 3-pointers. And then even the games before that, he was going to work inside the post on mismatches. We really highlighted that this past month. And now tonight we get to highlight Kristaps Porzingis' defensive ability, and it just feels as if Kristaps Porzingis, he's putting it all together right now. We're talking about the mismatches down in the post. We're talking about him shooting the 3 ball efficiently, and now we're talking about his defensive presence. That really sounds like he's putting everything together going ahead in the season. And I'll even say at the right time, if he was doing this in early December, we would have been amazed and wowed, but we would have said, it's still a long way to go. All of a sudden, this is the last game in January. All-Star break is 7 games away or 6 or 7 games away. And then after that, it's a sprint towards the finish line. This is exactly the moment you want to start seeing Kristaps Porzingis and the rest of the team start to uptick a little bit on the rise. And Kristaps, he's doing that in essentially the perfect motion right now, game by game. I mean, he's been player spotlight now 3 games in a row. I mean, for a while there in December, we couldn't get him on a thumbnail. Now he's going to be on every single thumbnail. So Kristaps, certainly hats off to him tonight. And really, I think we're going to see a lot more of this type of performance out of Kristaps moving forward, whether it's 30-point performance, whether it's 16, he gets 4 blocks, 3 steals. I think we're going to see it all from Kristaps Porzingis. And I don't think we're going to see those weird nights where, oh, he exits the game, he has 7 points, and he hasn't really done anything. We started to see that way too much in December, but as January's moved along, he's really been that X factor for the Celtics in terms of bringing them from really good to a great basketball team. And that's the streak we're seeing out of Kristaps Porzingis and the Celtics right now, despite some of the inconsistency in wins and losses.
I mean, I said it Wednesday night. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to knock on wood again because I also knocked on wood Wednesday night. But we are finally starting to see this guy healthy. I mean, like, I don't think in really looking back at it, I kind of blame myself for not kind of noticing this and putting it together in December and honestly to start January. But I mean, the guy, you mentioned this last post-game show, Seamus, he didn't have a normal offseason. This wasn't an offseason where, you're in your routine, you're, kind of doing you're enjoying your offseason, but you're also getting ready to get back into action. You're getting your body right around, late July after maybe vacationing somewhere nice, right? And you get to, enjoy that championship and get your body right and do all this stuff. He didn't have that, right? He was, catering to an injury after a surgery. So he had a much different offseason. And here he coming back arguably pretty early, right? Much earlier than everyone expected. I believe it was November 21st, if I'm not mistaken, right around that area. He comes back against the Clippers and he looks great when he comes back, but he starts to play really well these past, 6 or 7 games. And then, you kind of realize, oh, he wasn't 100%. Like, oh, you could tell now because, he's finding ways to make impacts on this game like he did tonight that isn't just scoring. And that is, to me, what makes these guys and what made them so dynamic last year, right? You have these really good all-star caliber players, and we've talked about this, right, that are doing the little things. Tonight, KP, right, 12 shots is not a lot of shots for a guy as good as Kristaps Porzingis, right? He knew what he needed to do tonight. He didn't take any bad shots. He understood that, okay, it's not my night. My shot's not falling. How else can I help contribute to winning basketball? What did he do? He moved the ball around great. 6 assists. I want to say that's up to a season high for KP this year. And how about 7 stocks, right? 4 blocks, 3 steals. He was making winning plays on both ends of the floor. And to me, that points to, okay, Kristaps is pretty close to 100% because he's not saving himself, right? He's not saving his body for offense. He is now very visibly, in my eyes, Seamus, inching very, very close to 100%.
Yeah, and to me, again, it goes back to the defensive end of the floor. It's his movement on the floor because we'll see guys a lot in basketball. We've seen this with LeBron James in the past in the playoffs where he's going, all right, I have to preserve myself for one side of the floor. I'm going to kind of take the defensive end off tonight, or I'm just going to take this complete game off tonight. One game that sticks out to me is game 2 of the 2018 Eastern Conference Finals when it felt like LeBron James just didn't want to play on the defensive end of the floor because really saving himself for the offensive end of the floor. And as we, of course, learned, he was saving himself for the rest of that series. And Kristaps Porzingis, it does feel like he's almost doing the same thing in regard to now. He's not necessarily just floating out there on defense. He's not just staying in one spot. That's what I noticed a lot on breakdowns going into this month is Kristaps Porzingis defensively. He was just kind of roaming around that high post area and not really moving up near the top of the key or the wings, the high wings, and he wasn't necessarily bringing himself all the way down to the rim unless like, oh, somebody's driving near the rim right now, and ultimately I'm just going to let them kind of going to do the Olay and I'm going to let them drive on me. Now it feels like Kristaps Porzingis, he's moving a lot more around the floor, and his presence is seen a lot more on the defensive end of the floor. And you really look at the stat line tonight, 4 blocks and 3 steals. That's getting it done defensively. You cannot come up with that number. You can't come up with the 7 stocks on the night without trying defensively and really being in all of the right spots because Kristaps Porzingis, those 3 steals, those 4 blocks, if he's not in the right spot all night, if he's not in the right positions, he's not coming up with that number whatsoever. And I really do believe the defensive end of the floor, it's showing it as much as anything else because offensively, the other night, it was great that he hit 8 threes, but he was still 14 shots from 3, only 4 from 2. And sometimes we can see the players, we've talked about this actually in the past on Postgame, where players, they can get away sometimes looking great on offense, not always making proper decisions offensively. You can still get to the free throw line, get yourself some points. You can throw up bad shots, make bad shots, and you came out with 18 points or 20 points. Not saying necessarily this is directly correlated with Kristaps Porzingis's performance the other night against the Bulls. I'm just saying in general for any player, a player got himself 18 points or 20 points, but could have taken terrible shots throughout the game and just made a couple of good ones, and the line looks a little bit better than what the play actually was. But defensively, you can't go out there and necessarily play terrible defense. You can't be out there and just dogging it defensively and come up with 7 stocks the way Kristaps Porzingis did tonight and really make the impact in which he did at parts of this game. Because we've seen Kristaps Porzingis in the past recently. Yeah, he's hit a couple of threes and made his line look good. And again, I'm not talking about the Chicago game necessarily because that was just a great game again all around by Porzingis. He had 3 steals in that game as well. But you can make yourself look a little better than you actually are on the offensive end of the floor by your scoring number while you're not actually getting after it defensively. We've seen that a couple times out of Kristaps Porzingis this season where he's just hucking up threes, maybe making a couple, not really going down there low for 2, not really drawing those mismatches in the post. But ever more so, we're starting to see it come along with Kristaps Porzingis balancing his game out everywhere. going down in the low post, getting those mismatches, even in the high post. The Lakers game, he was doing that phenomenally early on, and it feels like the Celtics just went away from it. I really do wonder if that game, if Kristaps Porzingis, if they keep going to him, specifically in the third quarter when the Celtics were making their little comeback there, if that game turns out differently, if Kristaps Porzingis can really get it going more often throughout the game, and it just goes along with the point of he's balancing his game out everywhere, and that includes on the offensive end of the floor and defensively as well. But again, defense is going to be the name of the game for the Boston Celtics, and even Kristaps Porzingis moving ahead, because I really do think the Celtics. I have things to say about the Celtics offense too, but defense is just going to be the biggest thing in any sport at any time. If you're making stop after stop after stop, if teams cannot consistently score on you, you're going to have more opportunities on the offensive end of the floor. And that's really when things can become tough for your opponent. The Celtics, they've waned defensively at times this year, but when you have somebody like Kristaps Porzingis bringing you that presence defensively, I think that narrative can very much change for the Boston Celtics going into the future, even though they still have to do more things as a collective team with everybody, not just Kristaps making up the entire difference.
I mean, I hate to put Missoula on blast tonight.
No, we can do it. I'm tired of it.
Okay, because but
I'm just gonna say it right now. I'm tired of it.
What was that decision late in the game to go offense defense with Horford and Porzingis? Because you ask me tonight, Porzingis was the best defensive player out of the Celtics locker room.
Well, how about the other night against the Houston Rockets, when the Houston Rockets consistently brought out this was at the end of the game too, when you had, again, offense, defense, you actually had timeouts in between. So you had time to sub whoever you wanted in and out of the game. That play with Alperen Şengün, where he is streaking down towards the rim, cutting towards the rim, gets that wide open pass, wide open dunk because Kornet blows his assignment. Well, even on that play, I would say that was bad. That was a bad personnel decision by Joe Mazzulla. If you're defending the Houston Rockets, the Rockets, I believe, had Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet, and Alperen Şengün on the floor. You hear those first four players, right? Şengün is your big out there, but those first four players, Brooks, quicker guard, not the quickest of guards on their team, of course, but Amen Thompson, very quick, very athletic forward out there. Jalen Green, we know about his athleticism, his quickness. Fred VanVleet was the inbounder, and even him as a smaller guard. Again, another quick player. Well, why do you have the double big lineup out there with Kornet and Porzingis with all these players? And Kristaps Porzingis, this is where the miscommunication was. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't even defending the lane. So you have two bigs out there, neither of which are by the bucket to defend a layup or a dunk. And it's a complete just mismatch all over the floor for the Boston Celtics, particularly defensively, because I look at that double big lineup the other night against the Houston Rockets and I go, well, that was specifically for the offensive end of the floor and to gain mismatches offensively, because those four players, you can't necessarily guard up with Kornet and Porzingis out there, because there's going to be a mismatch somewhere. And really the Celtics, what they were trying to gain is either that mismatch on Kristaps Porzingis or put a smaller player on Luke Kornet, bring him off of Luke Kornet and really get Luke Kornet those rolls to the rim, or even put him in that dunker spot. And that's more of an offensive personnel set the Celtics had out there the other night, playing defense on the Houston Rockets. And we saw the play afterwards. Peyton Pritchard came into the game, and that was the better personnel decision. But that was confusing the other night. And then tonight, I would say Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis. Now, for me, Al Horford, he's actually been pretty surprising defensively how good he's been this past month, really, for the Boston Celtics. But for me, I do think Kristaps Porzingis, if you're going to put him out there, you have to put him in the right situations. And if he's hot like he is tonight and coming up with some of the numbers he had tonight, just put him in there. Go out there and place him out there on the floor. And I really don't, to me, I don't necessarily understand some of the personnel decisions, specifically matching up with other teams when it comes to Joe Mazzulla and matching lineups. But furthermore, I'm going to go into this real quick. Offensively, it feels like we have no philosophy on most nights. And even tonight, I thought it showed a lot. I thought last season it showed a lot too. And even though the Celtics won the championship last year, I thought they very much did it as a collective team, playing collective ball without necessarily having a set philosophy in place. And this season, I think at times it's completely hurt themselves because we've seen the shot chucking all over the place. And we've seen moments like the other night against the Rockets where Jaylen Brown is just taking it by himself, doing whatever he wants. And even down the stretch of this game tonight, Brown and Tatum, I would say the last 2 shots of the game, they were not good shots. Now, thankfully, Brown and Tatum, they showed why they're superstars. They made those shots and they came up huge for the Boston Celtics. Yet those were not good shots. It didn't feel like the Celtics had a legitimately drawn up play for either one of them on that possession. Or really, I look at this too. The Celtics might have a play drawn up, but then they don't have a secondary option. They don't have a tertiary option within, oh, this goes wrong. Okay, we're going to go here. Even before halftime tonight, 4 seconds before halftime, timeout called. We go to commercial, which was just ridiculous. I mean, come on, 4 seconds. Like, play out the half, folks. Play out the half. I'm glad we got more Dunkin' Donuts commercials and we saw all that. But ultimately, 4 seconds. Okay, we inbound the ball to Drew Holiday. New Orleans, they have a foul to give. They cut 1 second off the shot clock. Well, why didn't it cross the mind of Joe Mazzulla or anybody in the Celtics coaching staff that was going to happen? You're going to have essentially, okay, you're going to have a play. Oh, you pass to Drew Holiday and he's going to get fouled. Okay, well, now you're going to have a baseline out of bounds play after the timeout, essentially. And the play that we ran, it resulted in a Kristaps Porzingis huck from the logo. I mean, it looked like he was looking for one handoff, and oh, that wasn't there. So, and I don't have anything else, and so I'm just gonna dribble, and shoot from the logo. I mean, some of these moments, I do wonder. Mike talked about it before coming in here on Postgame. Brad Stevens was talked about as one of the best coaches in the league. Talk about all the ATOs, all the different X's and O's in which Brad Stevens was always able to draw up for the Boston Celtics out there, specifically offensively, even defensively. And that series against the Toronto Raptors back in 2020 and Nick Nurse, that was a real game of basketball chess. Those were 2 of the best coaches in the game, making the smallest little adjustments on both ends of the floor to get their players open, to defend the other team, and take away multiple options or to really gain multiple options for themselves. Joe Mazzulla, most of his praise from what we see is just from the fact of, oh, well, he's doing a good job in his role taking over the Boston Celtics since being thrusted into the spot after Ime Udoka inexplicably went through his incident on the team. And really, Joe Mazzulla, he gets praised because he deserves a little bit for the fact of, well, he's younger than Al Horford. He's really not the typical age of a head coach. He's one of the younger head coaches in the NBA. And he has done an all right job with the Boston Celtics coming in and doing what he's asked to do. But you do look at a lot of situations, whether it's offensively or defensively for the Boston Celtics, like I was talking about the other night, like I was talking about earlier tonight before halftime, even down the stretch. It just doesn't seem like the Celtics are really that tactically sound. They're very talented. They know how to kind of make things up on the go and know how to play collective basketball. But from a philosophical standpoint, from a strategical and tactical standpoint, the Boston Celtics, they don't always seem like the most sound team. And that's really my biggest riff with Joe Mazzulla. And I got to say, I'm not a full Joe Mazzulla hater. I don't want to come across as that. But when criticism is due for what we see out there on the basketball floor and what correlates with the coaching staff, we have to rightfully talk about it. That's what we have to do. That's just what the case is.
I agree. I thought coming into this year, right, which is kind of why I'm so skeptical on what to think right now. Coming into this year, I said countless times, Joe has the flexibility this year, right? This season's not a pressure cooker, right? You won the finals, pressure's off. You can try things, right? You can really get experimental and you can see what works, what doesn't. You might lose a game because something doesn't work, but guess what? It's not the end of the world, right? You know that doesn't work. I think we're seeing that, which like in my mind, I'm like, okay, he's trying some new things. This is good, right? But on another hand, then this is where I agree with you. Recently, right, you're having a rough stretch of basketball. right? So there are some things that are just no-brainers, right? It's a no-brainer tonight to keep Porzingis on the floor because defensively he's really was your backbone tonight, right? That's a no-brainer. You don't need to try out tonight against the Pelicans going offense, defense with Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, which you've probably already done, right? Like, so again, that in terms of that experiment, I don't like that. He's done some, like, throwing in Drew Peterson in the mix sometimes. I like that experiment. Or throwing in Springer we've seen recently. I like that experiment, right? There's other Walsh trying out Walsh. Like, the Kata experiment, like you kind of figured out Kata can play. Like, so there's other things he's done that is good. I like that, right? And then if we're talking from an offensive standpoint, right? I'm sorry, but I've seen the same play of Tatum going downhill on the sidelines out of bounds since the game winner back in 2023 against Philadelphia when we first saw it. And ever since, in that same scenario, when the ball's in that same location, we've gone to that play. And it sometimes works, but to me, that kind of tells me that Joe Mazzulla, and I've said this, I like Joe Mazzulla. I think he's got enough crazy in him. I think he's a player's coach. I think he's relatable. I think he's a great guy. But he's not an X's and O's guy. He's not. He is not a guy that is going to make adjustments, that is going to outcoach the other guy. He's not going to do that, right? And I think the truth with Joe is, and this is nothing against him, he got dealt a great hand, right? He got dealt an amazing hand. Here he is at 36, 37, in his second year coaching what is arguably the best constructed roster we've seen in the past 25 years. And, again, so I'm with you. I think Joe Mazzulla, from a personnel standpoint, is all over the place in terms of what he is doing in X's and O's. I don't think he's a good X's and O coach, right? But at the same time, Seamus, I don't think he really necessarily needs to be. And I will say this, in his defense, Boston was really, really, really good down the stretch in those playoff games last season. So I agree this year, though, right? It's gone to a point where it's like, okay, can we talk about this, right? Like, can we at least address this a little bit?
Well, specifically, too, we talked about the offensive end a lot, but defensively as well, I think the mismatching or the matching up with other teams and when the Celtics decide to switch, when they don't decide to switch, there have been just too many moments this season and really recently where we've seen a lot of this. A lot of this from Tatum, from Pritchard, from Cornette, from whoever it is, Jaylen Brown. I thought we were supposed to switch on this. I thought we were supposed to do this particular action on this play, and it doesn't transpire. And I wonder, I go, well, what was said in the huddle on this, or what was given specifically? I don't even say in the huddle or during games. In film session, when you're going through it in film session, you watch other teams and go, okay, we want to do this specifically with this player to take away this action from this team. We're either going to switch this, we're not going to switch this. We want you on this player, and when they try to switch you on here on another player, we're going to try to scram this. We're going to try, and this is really what I'm saying right now is not very specific to a given situation, but it's just in general. You go through a lot of film session where you look at the other team and go, this is going to be our strategy against this team. This is what we're going to try to do. And even we've talked about this in the past, when things change within a game, you have to kind of make it up on the fly and go, oh, there's an adjustment here we have to make. And
He's never been good at that. He's never been good at that.
Look at I look at the Lakers. Okay, well, I want to say this about Joe Mazzulla real quick. He does take accountability for it, which I'll give him that, give him praise for that. Very accountable head coach is what you're talking about, how he has enough crazy in him. He's a good guy. He's very accountable as well. But look at the Lakers interview at the end of the first quarter the other night on TNT. Okay, and that was actually a week ago now. But he was essentially saying, after Kristaps Porzingis started the game on a dominant tear, the Lakers, they adjusted their defense, forced the ball away from Porzingis. And what Joe Mazzulla said in that interview was, we just have to keep making the right decisions with what the coverage allows us to do. And those aren't his exact words, but that's essentially what he was saying is, well, however the coverage is lined up here defensively, whatever they're forcing to us, we're going to take. And part of that is all right, and I can understand that from if that is your only option, you're going to go to that option. But ultimately, that's where you kind of highlight and go, well, if the Lakers made an adjustment for their defensive coverage against your offense, why not? The reason they made an adjustment is to force the ball out of somebody's hands and force you to go to a less efficient option. And then what we saw was Joe Mazzulla say, well, we're actually going to keep going to that less efficient option instead of readjusting to get the ball back to our first option, our primary option, our most efficient option. And that's what I took out of that little small interview at the end of the first quarter. I understand what he was saying in terms of, oh, well, here's the coverage. Here's how we want to play against the coverage. But and essentially, oh, we're gonna take the play in which the coverage allows us to take. But at the same time, I look at it and go, well, where's the adjustment going to be? Where's the readjustment going to happen within the game? Are you just gonna the Lakers, if they force the ball out of Porzingis or Tatum's hands, or even Jaylen Brown's hands to start the game? Well, are we just going to go to Pritchard the rest of the game? Just going to go to Hauser the rest of the game? We have to make some sort of an adjustment to really put the ball back into our most efficient players' hands. And I think that's really what Joe Mazzulla, he's never really been that strong at adjusting in game. And it does bite the team at times, I believe. And it's just something that we do have to talk about every now and then because we do see it out on the floor. And this season, I think it's affected the team really. I wouldn't say more than ever because I thought it really affected the team in 22-23 because his first season, like there were some real disasters in there. I mean, no doubt the first two games against the Miami Heat, that was something else, I will say. But I think it's gotten better since that point, but it's still, regardless, I don't look at Joe Mazzulla and go, wow, he's just this Brad Stevens-esque. Now, he's not expected to be either, but he's this Brad Stevens-esque coach in the league where every coach is giving him praise for what he's running out there. I think a lot of coaches look at what he's running and go, this is basic. This is basic. And it's hard to stop because they have guys like Brown, Tatum, Porzingis out there, Derek White and Drew Holiday. But if you replace, if you were to replace the Pelicans and Celtics rosters right now, I'm not saying the Pelicans will be worse than what they are because I mean, I don't know how they could be any worse than what they are right now, 12-37. I mean, I guess you could be 0-4 right now. And what?
You could be the Wizards.
49. Oh, you could be the Wizards who are on the second 16-game losing streak of the season. Oh, by the way, I don't see any Wizards post games out there. I've been trying to find them. Apparently, nobody makes them. I just think the team doesn't deserve them this season. But essentially, the Pelicans. The point is here, if you switched rosters, right? I don't know if Joe Mazzulla, I don't know if he's receiving as much praise as he generally does with the Boston Celtics. And that's not to say, oh, the talent has just made Joe Mazzulla, because Joe Mazzulla has done some good things as well in the Celtics organization to build the culture up and even win a championship last year. But again, it goes back to the conversation of tactically, strategically. Joe Mazzulla, he's really talking about middle of the pack role players. Joe Mazzulla is probably middle of the pack head coach in terms of the X's and O's. Not to say he can't get to the top of the pack one day, but at this moment in time, he's certainly in the middle.
Well, and you know what? That's the question for me, right? It's like, okay, because you have to really look at the whole Joe Mazzulla experience, right? Like he was not expecting, right? Following a NBA Finals appearance, being a back of the bench coach, right? He was not expecting to be the head coach of a team trying to get back to the NBA Finals and win a championship 4 months prior, right? Like he got thrust into this position, right? And, for me, he was pretty atrocious that first year in terms of those playoffs with X's and O's, right? But like, again, that was okay. It's like you're a first year head coach, period, right? Like really first year head coach experience, period. You come in, I thought he got better last year. I think he made improvements, but for me, it's like, I'm not seeing that next step that you'd think he'd take, right? It's like, okay, like a lot like, because really Joe is he's a very young head coach. So a lot like a 20-year-old rookie in the NBA, right? Each year you're going to get a new element to his game. And I think right now with Joe, you're not seeing that, like, that extra, because you can teach X's and O's, right? There's a level like Spo, right? Spo gets it. Some coaches just get it. Brad Stevens was a mastermind. You mentioned Nick Nurse, right? Those guys are just, I think, intellectually in the game of basketball are just a little bit different, right? but you can, learn X's and O's when you see enough basketball and you're in enough situations, right? You gain the knowledge and you kind of develop in that aspect. I haven't seen that this year from Joe, which is a little disappointing, I will say, because I am a Joe Mazzulla guy. I mean, I really am. I think he's got something you can't develop with this group, and that really is that little crazy factor to get these guys up and going. But I do think when you look at, a lot of the things that have been shaky in this patch for the Celtics, I mean, a lot of it has been personnel in under Joe Mazzulla. And I mean, I'm right there with you. That Rockets game, I mean, he came out and said it. I mean, it was bad. Like, it was terrible. The execution coming in. Yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad. So, talk about, let's bring the highlighter back. I'm pretty sure I highlighted him back in mid-December. But I'm going to re-highlight Joe Mazzulla. I'm going to make it a little bit darker, and we're going to get back onto this because there is definitely some room for improvement from an X's and O's standpoint from Joe Mazzulla. Another guy, though, that was highlighted, and I'm not going to lie, I think the highlight marks might be getting a little bit lighter these days, Seamus. And that is
white out. Get that white out.
Yeah, I think you might. And these are Justin's flowers tonight, guys, presented by Bucket Squad, guys. Bucket Squad is the best basketball apparel out there in the game, guys. Whether you are just casually hanging out or you are hooping, playing pickup, guys, Bucket Squad has the best merch out there. They got you covered for shorts, hoodies, t-shirts, basketball bags, and even they got their own Bucket Squad basketballs. So guys, again, use code Celtics Talk Weekly for 10% off your order. Guys, link will be in the description down below. Huge shout out to Bucket Squad for sponsoring this segment. Seamus, the flowers tonight, they're going to Derek White. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 of 9 shooting. Finally, a game where he's shooting 50% from behind the arc, 2 steals as well. I thought defensively, he did a great job tonight in that fourth quarter against Trey Murphy to kind of slow him down with what he was presenting. However, what did you like out of Derek White tonight?
Well, Derek White, he's really emerging onto the scene for the Boston Celtics for another time, because really he's already emerged for the Boston Celtics in the past in order to win them a championship, but he's re-emerging because really in December and January, Derek White, really rough stretches in there, both defensively and offensively, and just a lot of uncharacteristic play from Derek White on both ends of the floor, whether it was defensively not really being as physical, not being in the right spots at times, not rotating all that well, not giving the full effort we know he can bring. And then offensively, we talked about it so many times, just the shot chucking out of Derek White. Too many attempts where he's just taking one dribble. Oh, there's one pass, and there it goes. He's jacking up a 3. We're not getting into that tonight, though. We're saving that for the group, I guess. But Derek White, regardless, I think what we're seeing out of Derek White right now is getting back to what he was last season fully, and we're seeing a lot more patience from Derek White in terms of when he gets the ball into his hands on the offensive end of the floor, he's making the right decision and he's doing it patiently, and he's not just looking for that 3-point shot every single time. He's looking to make the right pass. He's looking to make the right drive. And if the 3-point shot is there, he still has to take it, and he's going to take it, but he's taking better attempts now. He's not just taking, one dribble up, one pass, I'm hucking up this 3 and somebody's hand is in my face. Derek White, we're seeing a lot more patience out of him, and really he's starting to, with the ball in his hands, just make better decisions all around, whether that's driving, going towards the rim, scoring around the rim. And in that Mavericks game, we saw multiple floaters out of Derek White in that game. And then for a while there, Derek White, we were looking at all of his shot charts going, what is going on here? He shot 8 times tonight. All 8 attempts were from 3, and he wasn't going to the bucket whatsoever. Derek White, we're seeing him go a lot more towards the bucket nowadays. We're seeing him take better shots, and he's really just coming around. And I almost wonder, too, if I believe, did Derek White, did he have an injury at the end of December for a couple of games? Am I mistaken?
I believe you're correct.
Sometimes I do wonder if that affects players' games behind the scenes, because we never know. Basketball is a very tough, very physical sport. When you play every other day, your body can really get ran down over time. It can really run down over time. And Derek White, I almost wonder, playing all the basketball he did last season, all the hard basketball, lost part of his tooth in the last game of the NBA Finals. And then he went to the Olympics. And we all think, dude, Derek White and Drew Holiday, everybody was talking about Tatum. Tatum on the bench, Tatum on the bench. Drew Holiday and Derek White were real pieces on that team because of how well they played off ball with LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, with all those guys handling the basketball. And ultimately, Drew Holiday, Derek White, they were perfect players to play off ball. They actually saw a ton of minutes in the Olympics. Derek White, of course, included in that conversation. And I wonder if coming into the season, maybe a little rundown from the experience he had over the summer, and then coming into the season, really, he started the season out hot, but just really tapered off real quick. And then we saw he was on the injury report a little bit, and maybe through that time period, he wasn't all that ready to go, and he wasn't 100% in every single game. Well, now it seems as if Derek White is turning another corner and really returning to the player that we all knew from last year and at the beginning of this season, and that we were all confused with when he went away from that. He went away from playing good basketball and really looking like just this average decision maker in the league, average player in the league. Well, he's kind of, you're talking about the highlight. We definitely have to get out the whiteout right now, the Derek whiteout. That's what we're going to end up calling it, because the highlight for Derek White, if he's giving you this consistent presence every single game, I think we're going to start to see the Celtics win a lot more games, because Kristaps Porzingis, the thing about Kristaps Porzingis is he brings the Celtics from really good to great. Derek White, if he doesn't perform well, the Celtics, they're going to have a hard time finding that type of performance out of any other player, because Pritchard, he can be up and down, but then there are times in which teams pick on Pritchard defensively. You can't pick on Derek White defensively whatsoever. Drew Holiday, he's always going to bring it defensively, but sometimes offensively, not always going to be the most efficient player on that end of the floor, because he's not always handling the ball. So you look at the guard rotation, Derek White just brings that different presence where he's bringing it both defensively and offensively every single night. And if the Celtics are getting this type of presence from Derek White, they're going to start to win a lot more games. I really do believe he was one of the main correlating factors this last month between, or the Celtics, are they playing well? Are they playing dominant basketball versus are they just kind of scraping by and really not winning games whatsoever? So to see Derek White now, he's, believe this is multiple games in a row. He's either been player spotlight or with the Flowers. Yep. We saw that at the beginning of January, the Rockets game, of course, Timberwolves game, he played well. That 3-game winning streak, of course, the Raptors game. So Raptors, Rockets, Timberwolves, or went Raptors, Timberwolves, Rockets, rather, that 3-game stretch. Celtics played phenomenally in those games, pulled out all of those games. And what was the correlating factor? Derek White played well in all of those games. Well, after that, Derek White fell off a cliff for January. Celtics fell off a cliff for January. And now what we're seeing ultimately at the end of the month is the Celtics, there are more points of optimism moving forward, although we're starting to see, I shouldn't say we're starting to, but we're still seeing some of that inconsistency within the team. We are starting to see more of the individual performances tick up, and one of those is Derek White. And I do believe it's giving the Celtics a higher chance to win on a nightly basis. And so we call Porzingis the X factor. I'm calling Derek White the Y factor on the Boston Celtics, because ultimately, if he's coming to play the Boston Celtics, they're just very, very tough to beat. He just gives you a completely different look from the guard rotation.
You summed it up in one word, in my opinion: patience tonight. Patience. He was playing so rushed. It felt like actually, now that we're in February, in January, right? Oh, not you. Sorry, not yet for Seamus, but for East Coast fellas,
dual post game right now.
I know,
January
right?
Celtics, February Celtics on this side.
I'm going to be more positive because we're not in January anymore. But like he was playing so rushed. A lot of the shots he was taking, it felt like, okay, that's not a Derek White shot. A lot of those off dribble, a lot of them on those high pick and rolls, it was to his left side, a 2-dribble pull up 3. Those aren't the shots that make Derek White so good. Tonight, countless times it was a pump fake into, a drive or a pass, or a ball reversal. And I really do think when you're a player like Derek White who's going through a slump, sometimes you're just going to have to get back to the basics. I've said this with the team, and I'm going to say with Derek White, he is just getting back to the basics. He's getting easy buckets. He's taking open catch and shoot threes, and he is playing much, much, much better. So I agree with Justin's flowers tonight. Derek White, he was kind of the Y factor. I like that saying you got going right now. And I don't, without him, I don't think they win this game. And I'm going to say this, right? While Kristaps Porzingis affects the Celtics team ceiling, Derek White impacts this team's floor. And I really do believe that Derek White, when he's not playing, it negatively, maybe Tatum and Brown, right? But I think there's a case to be made that sometimes he's more important than them because of the dynamic of this team. When he isn't playing well, this Celtics team's floor really goes down, right? So he might not, when he's playing well, the ceiling might not be as high as Porzingis takes this team, but when he's not playing well, I really do believe, Seamus, that this team's floor drops a lot.
I would completely, that sums it up, honestly, from what I was trying to say here, is where Kristaps Porzingis, definitely a ceiling raiser, but White,
Right.
You said it perfectly, that floor raiser for the Boston Celtics, because when Derek White isn't playing well, I mean, where you're going to find it elsewhere in terms of what he brings to the floor.
Right.
You can find a defensive presence elsewhere. You can find an offensive presence elsewhere, but it's not going to be eloped into the same package as it is with Derek White. And offensively, Derek White changed the entire philosophy of the Boston Celtics when he was traded to the Boston Celtics from the San Antonio Spurs in 2022. Cannot believe it's already been 3 years since that moment happened. That was we broke that on the trade deadline special.
We did
that day, of course. A little preview coming up here. But ultimately,
Derek
White came in, and he just changed everything for the Boston Celtics in terms of just his decision making with the ball in his hands. Because beforehand, now of course, Marcus Smart was kept through the deadline, right? Marcus Smart was the heart and soul of the team. There was no moving Marcus Smart in 2022. But Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, Marcus Smart, with those three guys on the floor at the same time, didn't always work with the Boston Celtics. It was a lot of dribble drive into nowhere. The catch and shoot wasn't great with that team. And it was just a discombobulated mess of players, really, specifically with those three guards, Richardson, Schroeder, and Marcus Smart. Of course, we know Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, both dealt at the deadline. Marcus Smart kept around from what he brought, both defensively, one defensive player of the year that year. And then offensively was a good playmaker as well. And just, again, heart and soul of the team at that time, at that point in time. And Derek White came into the equation. He changed everything up for the Celtics because he made better decisions with the ball. He was a catch and shoot type of player, and which was actually getting better at that point in his career. And we've seen him even get better in Boston since joining the Celtics team and joining the Celtics franchise, being traded to the Celtics. And he just changed everything in terms of the offense, specifically the offensive philosophy for the Boston Celtics and really what the personnel held with that team. And it just highlighted the importance of Derek White back then, but even more so now. He's still that player for the Boston Celtics 3 years later. If Derek White, if he's not out there, the Celtics are looking at a personnel grouping of guys who not always, I don't want to say Tatum or Brown or Pritchard, they're not good decision makers, but they're certainly all three players who sometimes look at themselves and go, oh, it's my turn right now. Oh, it's my turn with the ball. And Derek White is a little bit more unselfish with the basketball. And at points this season, he actually was more of a selfish player in terms of jacking up shots. But then ultimately, the best portion of his game is really when he is patient with the basketball, really looking to make that extra pass, really looking to drive, of course, with the basketball, and just making and looking. Why do I keep saying why do I keep? I keep saying making, like looking,
late.
not making.
It's late.
Derek White makes things happen, but he also looks for things. He's looking to make the right decision on the floor, looking to make the right pass, looking to make the right drive. He's always looking across the floor in order to just make the best thing happen for the Celtics offense in the most efficient manner. And that's what we've seen in the past. It hasn't always happened with the Boston Celtics. And when that goes away in terms of Derek White's game, specifically we saw it this season, just the whole team is just not in rhythm with each other collectively on the offensive end of the floor. And that's really, you kind of highlighted it too, where Brown and Tatum, they're certainly two of the pillars of this team and the most important players on this team. But Derek White, on certain occasions, he can be the most important player on the Boston Celtics. And really, he's the cement, he's the glue that hold those pillars together.
Right.
That's why Derek White is ultimately so big for the squad. And thankfully, we're starting to see him really come around, because for a while there, we were asking Justin's swear word on here. Was it regression? Was it regression with Derek White? Well, we see these last couple of games doesn't appear to be that way for D White.
Not at all. And, we don't have a graphic made for this. Honestly, thinking about it now, I was like, okay, well, how did this go over our heads? But today is a national holiday for Celtics fans. And it only feels right to talk about this. So 3 days to the date, right? January, I guess not anymore for me. So I guess I'm a day late, but still for you. January 31st, 2022, guys, is when the energy shifted for the Boston Celtics. And Jaylen Brown has that infamous tweet, "The energy is about to shift." Seamus, since that tweet, the Boston Celtics hold a record of 220-86. They hold the league's best defensive and offensive rating with a win percentage of 71%.
Okay, I was gonna say maybe if we get this up quick enough, we might be able to put it on stream here. Let's try this. Wait, if I send it to you right now, will you be able? Okay. Because see the logistics of the graphics here. I can't put it up on stream with the device I have on right now. But if we were able to,
we apologize. We should have. I don't know how we totally forgot about that.
But this is important. We gotta put it up here.
It's a national. We gotta demand. And I don't know if you caught the Jaylen Brown interview post game, but it was quite funny actually. He was talking about how you need to school off, because I'll tell you what. For Celtics fans, this was the moment where everything shifted for them. So let's get this up on the screen, because it would be sacrilegious not to.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
Okay, I have terrible news. I'm going to need an extra second here because it's not in the right format.
What?
Give me an extra second. Yeah, hold on.
Wait, is it not 16:9 right now?
No, it's not the dimensions. It's the file type. It's okay. I can do this.
Oh. I don't know. With separate conversation not pertaining to the Celtics right now, but sometimes the streaming service, it doesn't allow you to put in awesome photos. I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, we literally had one the other night queued up for everybody. It didn't quite work out. It would have been funny at the beginning of the show.
I think that was for the best.
Yeah, that one might have been
that one might have been the best. But here, let's here we go. Nothing Photoshop can't fix.
There we go.
So, guys, as you see, 3 years to the date, Jaylen Brown tweets out the energy is about to shift. Like I said earlier, guys, in that time, the Boston Celtics have obviously went on to win an NBA championship, hold a record of 220-86, hold the league's best defensive and offensive net rating. Jaylen Brown himself, guys, well, he went on, you can see it in that picture, to win finals in Eastern Conference Finals MVP. So, Seamus, you talk about this. I mean, you just, actually, if you go on our YouTube, you just put up a video on CTW on the YouTube page of the Art and Archive of probably the lowest of lows that we have as a fan base, I think, gone through with that RJ Barrett game winner. Flash forward almost 3 years to the date. I mean, wow, what a change in energy. Like literally, no pun intended.
That was, I don't know if Jaylen Brown knows about the NBA script writers or what's going on here, because that tweet was so perfectly timed, because even that RJ Barrett moment, that was not when the energy shifted. That was the rock bottom moment. Don't get me wrong. But there were games in January after that where the Celtics really didn't look like, I shouldn't even say themselves, because themselves back then, they were a 500 team. They were worse than a 500 team. They were 3 games below 500 when RJ Barrett made that shot. But I particularly remember a game against the Portland Trailblazers at the end of January that just made me go, this is just, it's nothing's gonna turn around here. There's no turnaround happening with this team. They're playing a little bit better on some occasions, but this Portland Trailblazers team coming in here shorthanded, Yusuf Nurkic completely obliterated the Celtics that night at the TD Garden. And the Boston Celtics, I believe they blew a 19-point lead. That was a theme
Was
of
that game? Yeah.
That was a theme of that season where the Celtics, they didn't blow 20-point leads. Now they blew a 25-point lead actually in that Knicks game, but it seemed to always be 19. They get the lead up to 19, and they go, no, you just can't get it past 20, and then all of a sudden it's 10, it's 8, it's 6, and the other team's in the lead all of a sudden. But really that Portland game, it felt like that was the last game that season where the Celtics really fumbled the bag against an inferior opponent. And not too long after that game, that tweet comes out from Jaylen Brown on January 31st, 2022. And the energy from that point in time most certainly shifted, because that season, that 21-22 season, was one of the more magical seasons in Celtics history. Didn't come out with a title, but up to one in the NBA Finals after an 18-21 record on January 6th. The turnaround, I still can't believe what happened that particular season, because really we thought at the beginning, we're going to have to blow it up between Brown and Tatum. This is going downhill fast. We're a lottery team. We were drafting 9th overall at one point in time, and yet we end the season as essentially we should have won the title, really. I mean, the Golden State Warriors, they were a little bit more experienced than the Boston Celtics that year. They had more physicality, more energy by the time the finals came about. But
Steph Curry happened.
Yeah, Steph Curry, the legend of Steph Curry, of course. Michael Jordan. I really do believe the Michael Jordan of our generation, really, Steph Curry. You say LeBron James, he's his own person, LeBron James. But Steph Curry, I mean, he's we saw him in the NBA Finals that year. But even looking at that playoff run, yeah, Steph Curry, if he doesn't go off in Game 4, Celtics 3-1 lead easily. Still almost had a 3-1 lead, even though Steph Curry went off in that game. One of the more legendary finals performances of all time. But this is still about the Boston Celtics in that season. They sweep the Brooklyn Nets in round 1. KD and Kyrie sweep them out of the building. Game winner from Jason Tatum in Game 1 to start that playoff run. In the second round, down 3-2 to the Milwaukee Bucks after blowing Game 5 at home. They go to Milwaukee Game 6, the Boston Celtics do, and Jason Tatum, 46-point performance against the Milwaukee Bucks. And even earlier in that series, remember Al Horford in Game 4. That was a series-shifting performance. Could have been 3-1 Milwaukee. Milwaukee was up 2-1. Al Horford comes out. Giannis dunks all over Al Horford, and Al Horford goes, all right, I got you one more later on in the game. And Al Horford put on a vintage performance in Game 4. Of course, talked about Game 5, blew it at the Garden, but then Game 6, Tatum, 46-point performance in Game 6 on the road in Milwaukee. And then Game 7, Grant Williams does Kelly Olynyk 2.0. He turns into Kelly Olynyk 2.0. Kelly Olynyk dropped 26 points in Game 7 on May 15th, 2017. Well, Grant Williams, he goes, I'm going to one-up you here, 27 points against the Milwaukee Bucks on May 15th, 2022 in Game 7 against the Milwaukee Bucks. And, of course, wait, did I just say Kelly Olynyk was against the Wizards? I might have accidentally said the Milwaukee Bucks, but he was against the Wizards in 2017. But after that, the Celtics go on and face the Miami Heat in the conference finals. Game 1, the Miami Heat take that game. And then the Celtics, it pretty much goes back and forth. Remember that series? That series, it was just blowout every single game pretty well until Game 6. Game 6, the Celtics, Rob exited the screen here. Let's get the layout correct.
I'm back.
Oh, nope, we don't need to get the layout correct. All right, we're good. But the conference finals, the Boston Celtics win Game 7 on the road against the Miami Heat in Miami, and Jimmy Butler misses that shot down the stretch. Celtics go on to the NBA Finals, achieve what seemed like was the impossible that season. And then in the NBA Finals, they win game 1 at Golden State, which it just does not happen. During Golden State's entire dynastic run, winning a game 1 at Golden State was just not a thing for any of the opponents of the Golden State Warriors. Celtics do that. They take a 2-1 lead in that series. Unfortunately, everything from there falters. But really what happened in that 2022 Finals, and then the next season in 22-23, where the Celtics go down 0-3 to the Heat, almost come back in that series, but they don't quite. In the series before, they beat the Philadelphia 76ers behind Jason Tatum's 51-point performance in Game 7 against the Sixers. That moment in 2022 and that tweet really just ignited this entire unbelievable stretch for the Boston Celtics that really brought the Boston Celtics back into relevancy, real NBA relevancy, and of course won them a championship last season, of course. And just, it's amazing the story in which has went on since that point, and really it's still going on because this Celtics team still has a chance to go back to back, going through some rough times in terms of going back and forth with the team right now, wins and losses, but it's all just a part of the story of where the Celtics are ultimately still going to go and have already went after that tweet was released to the world from Jaylen Brown. And again, I just think Jaylen Brown might have a key card to the NBA scriptwriter room because it could not have worked out more perfectly. The Boston Celtics, they are still, regardless of the Cavs, the Thunder. Don't get it twisted, folks. The Boston Celtics, ever since that moment, have been the team to beat in the NBA. They've been the team to beat. We are the feared. Remember that from 2022?
I do.
We are the feared.
I do. And you know what? The crazy thing about this tweet, too, to me, was it wasn't just a shift. It was a shift in expectation for this team, too. Because, I mean, here the Celtics are, right? They're coming off of that COVID year, 36-36, a 500 ball club. You know, you got rid of Kemba Walker. You know, Brad Stevens gets, elevated from head coach to general manager. You know, you bring in a new head coach. The direction of the team is kind of like, okay, like, is this the fallout of the Kyrie Irving experience? Is that what we're witnessing right now with the Celtics, right? Because it was almost a year and a half of bad basketball from Boston. They made a run in the bubble, but then post bubble for a year and about 2 months, it was pretty rough sailing for the C's. And then, I mean, again, you talk about it. I remember we covered that season too. It went from, oh my God, right? Like, let's get back to playoff contention to, oh wait, hold on. Okay. We're back in playoff contention. All right, let's get, do we have a chance to get out of the first round? Okay, wait, hold on. Are we contenders now? And funny enough, if we're actually reflecting, there was one game in particular in that season that really sticks out to me. It was a regular season game at home on a Sunday, 3 o'clock tip off against the Brooklyn Nets. And it was Kyrie Irving I was at that game, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant coming into town. And Tatum goes for 50. And it was kind of at that moment you were like, okay, that was Boston's statement win, where it was their signature key. They beat him in overtime. I believe it was overtime. Tatum had 50. And it was just like, okay, this team's legit now. And that was the game that to me was like, okay, no, these guys could actually do it. And you know what? I'm telling you, they were a pain in the ass that postseason because they just kept making life hard on themselves. But I mean, you talk about that tweet. Jaylen Brown claims they had nothing to do with basketball. Even he claims it wasn't a basketball related tweet. I have my own theories on why the energy was shifting, but wild to think about. One, that was 3 years ago, and two, the Celtics since that tweet. In 3 seasons, they've been to 2 of the NBA finals. They've been to 3 Eastern Conference finals. I mean, you got Jason Tatum's won an All-Star game MVP. He's won the Eastern Conference finals MVP. Jaylen Brown's won finals MVP in Eastern. I mean, the Celtics since that tweet have been the most, cream of the crop of the NBA. So it's pretty wild. It would be sacrilegious to not mention that tonight. No doubt about it.
We got to go back to 1984 or 1980 with the Celtics. Did Larry Bird ever release something in the papers about the energy shifting for the Boston Celtics? Because it almost feels like that tweet ignited the run in which we're seeing now that is almost similar to the 1980 Celtics, where they're making the finals every other year. They're making the conference finals almost every single year. And at that point in time, this was now I still think for the history books, this is very important to clarify. At the time of that tweet, the Boston Celtics, they were very much mediocre. They were very much mediocre. And you
That would have
mentioned
been a
it was
compliment. That would have been a compliment.
and it was a year and a half of terrible basketball, 20 and 21. That was 36 and 36 record. The team was all over the place. There were a million different starting lineups that year. And really that bubble team, they made the conference finals, but that team wasn't a team anyone looked at and went, "Oh, these are real contenders right here." I mean, they looked at that team and went, "Oh, they're pretty good, but are the Heat better? The Lakers, the Denver Nuggets at the time. There were multiple other teams, even the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee
Right.
Bucks went
They were
out.
the 1 seed. Yeah.
Yeah, they went out early in the bubble. But that Celtic team in 1920 wasn't exactly the best of teams. It was really a thrown together team because that was the season immediately after the Kyrie Irving experience and experiment really went completely wrong. Celtics, they kind of, for no pun intended here, but they knee jerk the Kemba Walker decision. Well, it's Kemba Walker's knee.
Yeah,
Just
bad
saying.
knees. No, bad. Hey, I'm not hating on it. I'm not hating
No
on it.
jerking tonight, by the
Yeah.
way, on this broadcast. No Justin and Franco here, so there's
Right.
no jerking, folks.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that season is just a thrown together season by the Boston Celtics. They turned out pretty good, but at the same time, they weren't exactly contenders. 21 was a disaster, 36 and 36, as I mentioned, but then 21, 22, we went through every single emotion in that season. It was, because at the beginning of the season, we thought, could we be the 2 seed, the 3 seed, maybe the 4 seed? Yeah, we could be that good of a team. You know, we have some pieces. We're starting to build from where we were last season. And last season, the season beforehand, we were the 7th seed, and we were not expecting to be that. We were thinking, maybe 2, 3, 4. We could make our way up into the standings. Well, that fell off the cliff. It was just mediocre early on. Then it was just straight up bad. We were picking 9th overall. I believe we were as low as 12th in the Eastern
18
Conference.
and 21.
Yeah, we were at 11th, 12th. We were just floating right around there under the play-in, where you see teams like the Chicago Bulls right now, who we faced the other night, and other teams in the Eastern Conference ultimately. And the Celtics, they were that team. It was like, we're less than mediocre. We're even below the play-in at this moment in time. And if you think back to the old format of the playoffs, we were in 4 spots under the old format, not even in the playoffs before the play-in. And then you go on, the Celtics, they come back a little bit, but we're still thinking, they're still mediocre. Then they're a good squad. Then when we got the 6, I remember when we secured the 6th seed, it was after a game against the Orlando Magic.
Yep.
And we were all kind of looking around going,
Oh.
6th seed, we were above where we were last year. This is a little crazy. And then further on into the season, it just kept getting better and better and better. It went from mediocre to, all right, we're pretty good, to, ooh, we're really good, like you said, and then to, oh, we're contenders, to, oh my goodness, we're the best team in the Eastern Conference entirely, and we could be in terms of the entire league, we could be the best team in the NBA. So that tweet at that time, the Celtics, there was no path for them to be the best team in the East or the best team in the NBA whatsoever. It was really just mediocre to all right to not even that great. And that is what really that tweet, why that's tweet is so massive and huge and really a part of the storybook for the Boston Celtics, because I know Jaylen Brown doesn't claim it was about basketball, but what the Celtics did and accomplished after that tweet,
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be mentioned in Celtic history. It has to be framed up on a wall. We'll get a little thing over here, right here, look. Bam, right here, frame it right here. The energy is about to shift. And then it ultimately led to the banner we have back here. And just what transpired after that tweet was just, you can't really write it in a storybook. The way it all played out afterwards, it's really hard to comprehend that actually went down, and that was the history of the Boston Celtics. And us here on the CTW network, all of us who's involved, we're all very lucky to be fans of this team, analysts of this team, very lucky to be part of this program as well, because we all saw it go down game by game that season. We were all really a part of the run too, just covering every single game that year. It was very special, and it continues to this day to be something very, very special. So that tweet by Jaylen Brown, the energy was about to shift, certainly shifted, and even to this day, it shines bright out there in Celtics universe.
Oh, without a doubt. In that playoff run, I know we didn't get away with the trophy, but it was special. It was a vibe in the air that is I remember walking into that TD Garden and then oh my God, it was special. I mean, 2024 was special too, but there wasn't adversity last year, right? They kind of knew they were going to do it, right? Between who they were playing and just how dominant they were in 2022. They should have been eliminated like 3 or 4 different times, and eventually they weren't. Eventually they were, but I mean, every single time they responded, they bounced back. Tatum's 46-point game. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So shout out Jaylen Brown, really, for shifting this and turning this ship around, and shout out the Celtics for getting this win tonight. But guys, the Celtics will be back in action this Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers, guys. After that, I believe that's, I'm sorry, I should argue. So that's a 6:00 tip-off time. After the final buzzer sounds, head right back here. Guys, I'm going to say this. I don't say this a lot, but I'm going to say this. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications, guys. It's a huge help. If you enjoy the show, if you don't enjoy the show, don't like it, right? Be honest. But if you enjoy the show, give us a like, and make sure you turn on post notifications so that you get alerted when we go live. But if you don't want to do that, we do go live after every game. So, guys, again, the Celtics, they were able to squeak out a win tonight. 118-116 was your final score behind a Jason Tatum little game winner buzzer, almost buzzer beater, 0.2 left on the clock, guys. Until next time, cue that music. And, of course, guys,